Alrighty, so I've been flying my very first mini quad frame. This is the Eachine Racer 250 standard frame. I had it for a while and it was my only mini quad, and then I got an Emax Nighthawk 250 off of LHI, like a clone, and I flew that for a while. And then my dad sent me a Eachine Racer 250 Pro, which is basically this materials in a true X, and I've basically been only flying that ever since. It is, I suppose it's probably fairly modest. The 250 Pro, it has 2205 motors versus the Racer 250's 2204s, but it's a true X. So I was really happy about it because I was actually quite familiar with this construction, and so then it was going to be a nice experiment to fly the true X of the same materials and feel the differences in shape without feeling differences in materials, although I did have bigger motors in that vehicle. Anyways, the ESC on the 250 Pro is kaput, and so rather than cannibalizing one of these are cheaper ESCs. I'm not sure why the motor damping is so much gentler on these. I think it could just be the motors, not the ESCs, but because they're so much cheaper, I might just only fly this one the way it is. And so anyways, I've been flying it today, and I'm really starting to get a pretty good grasp on the differences between the two frames. The True X has a severe advantage in changing direction. It's remarkable. This thing doesn't even turn. I mean, if I try to fly like tight turns and stuff like that, it's very inefficient to fly this one, especially with the low-powered motors, because the sacrifices the frame causes you in forward tilt really start to stand out when you have the reduced motor power. Now, these motors are not the original stock motors. They are ready-to-sky motors. I bought them as an experiment because it's $15 for 4 motors, but they are very weak when compared even to the stock Eachine Racer 250 motors. So, however, an interesting thing is it does make you rely on the shape of the frame. And one thing I thought a lot about this morning whilst flying was that when going through tree gaps, this frame shape flies straighter through the hole. So with the X shape, I would find myself having to do more of a hopping motion through the gap, where I have to kind of come up to it and then I have to kind of hop through it. It doesn't, I mean, it being a steeper tilt, that's probably the whole thing, is that it needs to be changing its tilt so much more to change the speeds and to approach the gap. Whereas with this copter, it flies like this at forward momentum at a shallower pitch. So when you're approaching and passing through the hole, you really notice that you maintain your altitude out the other side of the hole safely without hitting things, and it feels like it's just driving straight through it. And so actually that's the whole point of this little video, is to talk about how it travels through gaps so differently. So the whole time, I was actually describing it this morning as like a sled. The copter flies differently, but you really notice when you're approaching through a gap, maybe an advantage, I guess, of the elongated profile of the Racer 250. Where we at? Here we are. So I've really been enjoying that. I guess I'll just show some features here. I got a cardboard camera mount with one of those little cheapy cameras. It's a Pico Blocks FC Micro FC. I don't know if you can see there. And I got a Banggood OSD, minimum OSD, and a TS5828 VTX where the wires are coming loose, so I'm losing video. If you look up on AliExpress, you'll see these blue labeled ESCs. I can't get a shot here. Anyways, they're these $20 for 4 ESCs, and they have the blue and the white. I guess you can kind of see in there label, and they work for this setup. And then I got a 10-minute flight out of this China Hobby Line 30C battery, whereas my 55C batteries, which are a little more aged but at the same milliamp hours, did not provide the flying time. And I think what's going on there is that my motors are not that powerful, and because the C rating, the lower C rating, will kind of better match the motors. When I give it more throttle, it doesn't try to increase the throttle so much, whereas the more powerful battery pushes the motor, but the motor just doesn't have the power, so there's a lot more entropy from the higher C rating, because the motor is providing less resistance, so it's offering it feels like it's bogging out more on the higher C rating battery, whereas with the more humble C rating, it feels like the power is kind of more appropriate. And then I flew for 9 minutes and 45 seconds of armed time this morning on one of my batteries, on that 30C battery. Pretty cool. So I am enjoying my Eachine Racer 250 standard at the moment. It's got the 5048 Racer stars, which are too much propeller for the motor, but I'm gonna leave it that way and just fly that for now, because I'm enjoying the stability. Amazingly, they vibrate the least out of any propeller that I've ever put anywhere. I mean, it could just be that the steep pitch of the prop has so much more air resistance down it that it kind of provides like a sort of stability that shallower pitched props, they're spinning faster, so they're vibrating harder, as best I can figure.